this is Victoria, and this is my project Metacognitive Reflections. This is my end of quarter video for fall 2018. So first, the problem statement of my project is that students in research labs like DTR want to become more efficient researchers. However, this is hard because students often do not know how to break bad habits and adapt to more efficient learning strategies. And just to show an example of this, I interviewed one student in DTR, and I included a quote from the interview, and he said, "Because of my stubborn nature, even if I saw a flaw in my workflow, I kept it to keep the consistency. I often do not have a set schedule of working, so this led to a lot of procrastination and disorganization." So through this quote, you can see that the student has, to some degree, some awareness that their current process isn't entirely efficient. However, he did not know how to address this. Even though he knew he was procrastinating and was disorganized, he didn't know which learning strategies to apply to become a more effective researcher. So the intervention I propose is metacognitive reflection. And through metacognitive reflection, students better understand their problems and learn how to apply learning strategies to become more efficient researchers. And then current approaches that exist in terms of addressing this obstacle include different types of reflection. So a really common one is journaling. Even if students journal, I've found that students often don't know what a metacognitive reflection looks like and don't know how to write a good reflection. So they often just recount what happened in the past rather than describing their current obstacles and what their current process is and what sort of impact that has. And oftentimes they don't really go over what they did well and what they could have done better, which through my research I found is really helpful because it helps students understand the context of their learning strategies and whether or not they should keep on applying these strategies. In terms of DTR specifically, current reflection scaffolds that we have are the mid and end of quarter self-assessment. However, these take a long time and are only done once a quarter. And oftentimes, especially with the end of quarter self-assessment, a lot of students kind of just get it done. They go away on break for a while and then forget about what they wrote. So they're not really internalizing the learning strategies that they reflected on during this time. Many challenges within this problem are that finding out what good reflection is not always straightforward, and it's hard to get students to change their current behavior. Lastly, establishing good reflection practices may take time. To summarize my contributions for this quarter, I did a lot of need finding to understand the gaps in current solutions to build a system that would better address the needs that I saw my users had. So overall, I designed a system to ping students during their work sessions and prompt them to catch bad habits while they're occurring. This is different from other methods that I mentioned previously, such as journaling and the current assessment we have in DTR, because these are more after the fact reflections, whereas my reflection system pings students during their work sessions and tries to catch those bad habits while they're occurring so that students can see them happening basically in real time. So at the end of the quarter, I conducted a study with 4 students to see if they could experience some sort of metacognitive behavior change upon using my system. And prior to that, I also did need finding through status update, where I tested with all students in DTR to better understand challenges with reflection. And through the study, I especially found that students have a hard time internalizing effective learning strategies. And here's a little more on the need finding I did. So throughout the quarter, I conducted interviews to understand what really made it difficult for students to reflect. And actually, so here's a little how the quarter kicked off was actually pretty good, because one student in DTR actually messaged me over the summer telling me that my reflection scaffolding from the previous quarter, which was spring 2018, was really helpful, and he thought a lot about it, and it actually prompted him to reflect on a fight and apologize to one of his friends. So I saw that the reflection scaffolds I was using actually did produce some metacognitive behavior change, and the first person I interviewed was him to better understand what exactly prompted him to have this change in his behavior. And he specifically said that because I had him reflect on what he did well and what he could have done better, he really looked at the pros and cons of this fight with his friend and saw that the cons of his actions during this fight really outweighed the pros. And since he had that measure, he was prompted to apologize to his friend and experience some sort of metacognitive behavior change through that. Um, Later on, through more need finding, I identified several core obstacles. And here are a few examples. So students don't take time to reflect and they just push through the task without being mindful about their actions. Students may not be aware of why certain processes are inefficient. Students struggle to internalize good learning strategies and are not aware of when to use them. And then students may struggle to apply learning strategies, even though they know it would be good to do so. So overall, in that last, well, to basically sum it up, like, students told me that, like, yes, they felt that they were more aware through doing their reflections, but often didn't know what to do with those reflections and really struggled to make their actions, their reflections actionable. So after I found these core obstacles by conducting my status update, which I have my template up here, and I had students answer a few reflection questions and also kind of fill out this like reflection rubric that I put together based on literature I read to see how effective their current strategies were and how well they were reflecting. And through this process, I identified sort of like a causal model of what's like currently going on. So this was the before outcome in which students did not reflect. So by not reflecting, they don't observe what they did well or could have done better. They don't internalize good learning strategies and then default to previous ineffective strategies. Afterwards, students continuously face recurring challenges in DTR and no metacognitive change takes place. And the breakdown I saw in my status update was that students did observe what they were doing well and could have done better because there's a lot of reflection scaffolding in DTR, but oftentimes students don't internalize good learning strategies, as in they don't really remember, like, hey, in this instance, I should probably be using this strategy because it would help me save time. Rather, they just kind of push through things and aren't very mindful of what they are doing at times. So because of that, they default to previous ineffective strategies. And then the desired outcome that we wanted was that students reflect, maybe not habitually yet, but students reflect and then they observe what they did well and what they could have done better. They later evaluate their progress and react to which learning strategies are most effective. So students gain this awareness and consider the possibilities of their strategies and whether or not this really helps them. Then students later apply the new strategies that they identified as most effective, and metacognitive change will then take place. Okay. Then a little more on my design arguments. So once I identified these core obstacles, I then delved into my core characteristics to figure out how to overcome these obstacles. So my characteristics include prompting students to reflect on a specific blocker to encourage awareness and focus on process rather than outcome, and then ask if there are any alternative strategies that they could apply. So by doing this, we could see if they have by seeing if they can identify good learning strategies, we can see if they've internalized them and can identify, like, oh, can I, like, use the strategy in this situation, and will it be helpful, and can I be more effective about my process by doing this? Afterwards, students are pinged to see if they have applied these good strategies, and they are also asked if they are satisfied with their current process and if there's anything they need to change. And if they do say that they need to change something in their behavior, we later track whether or not they decided to change what their current process and actions were. So by designing these core characteristics, I focused a lot on making reflection more actionable, and this really was different from previous established methods because it was more focused on helping students hone in while they were working on like how satisfied they were during their process rather than looking at reflection as an after the fact strategy, because oftentimes students felt that like by reflecting afterwards they couldn't make any changes to that um, previous work session and felt less like they could have taken action to change something. So my technical approach and system model is essentially a Slack bot that pings users to reflect during a specified work session. So the system requires students to input their work times. I didn't build a Slack bot this quarter due to time constraints, but I did my study by pretending that I was a Slack bot, and I went and I personally pinged the students I was testing on and asked them for specific times that they would be working on their project, and students were required to answer these reflection questions on Slack. In addition to this end of quarter study, I had my status update. So the goal of my status update was to gain a better understanding of why reflection is hard and why some people think it's not useful. I also tested on how peers would feel about evaluating each other's reflections with a rubric. My core findings from doing the study were that students have a hard time taking away actionable feedback from reflection. Students want to know alternative strategies to apply if their current processes are ineffective. Students may not be aware of the gaps of their current strategies or cannot identify areas of improvement. And then students may not feel comfortable grading each other, and the rubric should come with concrete examples to help peer evaluators make informed decisions, because a lot of people, I used some jargon from the literature in metacognition, and a lot of the students who were participating in the study weren't really familiar with that jargon. So I got a lot of follow-up questions just asking me to clarify what I meant, and I saw that it would have been really helpful if students had some sort of example with the rubric. So afterwards, my end of quarter study, I took away the peer component because I decided to slice on one specific part of reflection, which was like just seeing if like is peer intervention really necessary, like how well are students reflecting by themselves, and like can we make a system that makes reflections more actionable just by having a single student participating in the system. So the goal of the study, by using a Slack bot, um, was to identify whether or not reflection during a work session could bring about metacognitive behavior change and increase awareness of blockers and learning strategies. So my core findings by doing this study was that half of my participants experienced metacognitive behavior change, and awareness of learning strategies and blockers may not be enough to make reflections actionable. So because I had two students that my tests worked really well on, they saw flaws in their current strategies and then applied new strategies that they were familiar with to basically become more efficient researchers and save a lot of time. Like, for example, one student was just about to dive into her research project and work for a designated 2 or 3 hours, but then I pinged her and then she realized, oh, instead of trying to focus on this one task and slicing vertically for like this entire work session, it would be a lot more efficient for me to slice across. So she wrote out a list of subtasks that she wanted to hit during this time period. And because she had that mini planning session, she was able to accomplish a lot more during that time period than she had originally anticipated. So that strategy really helped her, and she experienced metacognitive behavior change because she could see that her current process really needed improvement in some ways, and she acted on that. However, for the other participants in my study, they did not experience metacognitive behavior change. One reported that he didn't think there was any area for him to improve and he was satisfied with his current process. And the other one reported that even though he felt like he was not doing as well as he could have and he was wasting some time, he didn't propose any alternative strategies and did not act on what he thought he wasn't doing well on, so he made no changes to his process. So Because of those other results, I saw that additional intervention may be necessary. And one form of that may be evaluation from peers or mentors so that they can intervene and possibly offer alternative strategies to students that can't see how they can improve. So, discussion and next steps. I already touched the limitations of my project, but to elaborate more on them. Some of them are that reflection may help increase awareness, but if students are not familiar with the learning strategies they need, they cannot apply them. There's no way to introduce alternative strategies in the current system, and establishing good learning strategies and habits may take time. So, my future designs and next steps, taking into account for these limitations, include introducing mentor and peer intervention in the system to help provide alternative strategies, testing to see if metacognitive reflection can help break bad habits, taking a deeper look as to why reflection is a hard skill to develop, and conducting a month-long study into looking into reflection as a habit, because especially with like habit building and development, that may take a very long time to understand, and habits develop over time and need time to change. So that's definitely something I'll be looking into for next quarter. So my takeaways for this quarter, just to summarize, are that awareness is not enough to make reflections actionable. However, awareness is good because it helps students identify what is working and not working in their current process, and it helps students identify good learning strategies. So reflection during a work session can intervene with bad habits and prevent them from occurring, because during that session, students can really pinpoint what's going well and what's not going well in their process, and actually take action during that work session to basically make changes and be more effective about their process. And that's it for my end of quarter video. Thank you for listening.